Hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today we have a special episode. We're going back to our movie reviews and we're talking about The Last Jedi. And we are crossing the streams. We have Ashley Coffin, who's joined me for a lot of episodes about the Star Wars movies, as well as a number of ethics episodes, as well as Riki and Sarah Hayashi, who have been joining me for all of our discussions about the Clone Wars. So I'm really excited to hear what all of us have to say. All that will be after a commercial break we have no control over. All right, welcome back. My name is Matthew, your host. I'm joined by Ashley, Sarah, and Riki. Each of you wanted to say hello and introduce yourself, and just give your first impression of what's your first thought about this movie?
Hi, I'm Ashley. I like Star Wars. I'm a dirty cash, and it was just fine.
Sound good, Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah. I also like Star Wars. I'm a big fan of the movies, and it sort of dabbled in some of the peripheral stuff, but not that much. I liked The Last Jedi. I think I liked it I definitely liked it better than Rise of Skywalker by a long shot. And it's probably my number 2 favorite movie of the recent releases.
Nice.
Well done. Hi, I am Riki. I love Star Wars. Probably my favorite franchise of all entertainment.
Can you show off your tattoo?
Sure.
Show me.
The split screen thing is gonna
That's awesome.
Oh.
I also have a Star Wars Rebel tattoo.
Oh, nice.
And specifically this movie, I loved it when it came out, and every time I watch it again, I gain an even deeper appreciation for it. And at this point, I'm pretty comfortable saying that it is my favorite Star Wars movie.
Nice.
Wow.
Nice.
Of
That's
all
awesome.
of them?
Yeah.
No way.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
It's better than Attack of the Clones.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, I didn't realize that part.
All right. And also, just a quick note for those who are listening at home. We're doing this episode... We're doing this episode live on Twitch, so from time to time we'll be reading comments from people in the chat. So just for those who are listening later, that's what's going on. And for the people who are listening in the chat, as we go on, if you have comments, questions, please throw them out. We'll try to get to them when we can, but we'll certainly also get into a lot of them at the end. And I think for me, I'm Matthew, as I said, and let's kind of dive in more to our thoughts on this movie, because I think I am somewhere partially in between you all. Riki, I'm very close to where you are. In many ways, Star Wars is also my favorite franchise, and I feel like this movie captures the essence of some of the general themes that I love so much about these movies. What it says about the Jedi and the idea of a religion that failed, what it says about, failure, what it says about mythology and legend, what it does, I know, controversial opinion, what it does with the character of Luke. There's so much that is just when I think of what Star Wars teaches me and what Star Wars means, I think of this movie. But I was watching it again last night, and I feel like the execution of some parts are just not what I would have wanted. It feels like they are telling such great themes, but that sometimes they stumble a little bit in the way scenes are done, or things feel a little bit too heavy-handed. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. I get what you're saying. I definitely I love Old Man Luke. I think I love what they did with his character.
Yeah.
He's so crotchety.
Yeah. And I also really liked that Poe and his cockiness just make things worse. And if he would have just done what he was told, things would have been better. But then there's also so many moments that are just kind of huh? That's not how that works. So yeah, I don't know.
So for me, growing up in high school, we learned about the hero's journey, right? Are you all familiar with that? And Star Wars, the original A New Hope, was presented as a hero's journey for Luke. And it fits that archetype of a very old, mythological, Greek mythology type story. And that really resonated, obviously, getting to talk about Star Wars in high school English class was great.
I'm jealous. We did not do that in my class.
Me
And
neither.
watching this movie has a completely different take on what heroes are or should be. And it's to the point where I don't feel comfortable calling people heroes, because it's really deconstructing heroes. And Poe Dameron specifically, the way that he goes through his journey in this movie, I call the leader's journey, where he starts off as this cocky pilot who just kind of wants to show off and blow things up. And over the course of the movie, through his interactions with Leia, he learns how to be a leader to this budding rebellion. And by the end of it, she hands the reins of leadership over to him. Literally. I mean, not literally, but she says, "Why are you looking at me? Follow him." And points to him, and then everyone follows him.
Yeah, I definitely picked up on that watching this again. I just the juxtaposition of her saying at the beginning that very powerful line where he says, there were heroes in that battle, and she says, "Dead heroes, no leaders." And that is just such a perfect juxtaposition with the line you're talking about there. I hadn't even thought about it in terms of how much she's passing that mantle on. That's definitely a powerful moment.
I think my biggest question with what happens with all that is, why didn't Laura Dern just tell her plan?
Because why would she? He's just some cocky pilot. Like, she's the leader of this operation. He has absolutely no reason to know this plan. Like, this is a very precarious plan. Sorry, this is like
no.
triggering
I
for me.
I want to know. I'm just like, because I have like that is like one of the only things I was like, well, just like if he was causing some problems and Leia trusted him, why not just pull him aside and be like, "Listen, asshole,
we got it online."
I don't understand the big secrecy.
That's how we've been conditioned by other movies. That the flyboy hero, Poe's character, should always be in the mix, should always have a say in it. And this added like a level of realism where she says, "Hey, didn't you just get demoted?" Like, like, why should I tell you anything?
For like going against orders. Yeah, and like you're in here trying to like he told Laura Dern like, "Hey, here's some really obvious information." Just like she's like, "Oh, thanks for that. I didn't know that." Right? Like he's just being super cocky. Yeah,
he does a lot of butting in and telling people like very obvious things, like when the transports are escaping from the cruiser and they're discovered by the First Order, and the First Order ship starts taking out the transports. Poe like runs up to the cockpit of the transport he's in, and he says, "Faster, go faster!" And I was just like, do you think they were like going at the slow speed?
Yeah. CJ Hunt points out in the chat that he actually did, by telling everyone her plan pretty freely when he's talking to Finn. That's how DJ finds out. So we actually do have a sign, and it's funny because I've wrestled with this a lot, because I do think that if Admiral Hodo had said something to reassure him that everything obviously is different, but I think one of the themes that I don't think I'd picked up in this movie until I watched it this time is trust. Like, so much of this movie is about who do we trust and who do we not trust. Luke doesn't trust Rey. He doesn't trust himself. Holdo doesn't trust Poe. Or, I'm sorry, even more important, Poe doesn't trust Holdo.
Right.
Like, I heard a lot of military folks chime in on this question with the idea of that part of how it's supposed to work is you trust your commander. And if your commander tells you, here's what our plan is, you assume that they know something that you don't, that they have some information there. And then obviously that can get problematic, but it's one of the things I think I like so much is the way that they flip that, because I'm curious how you all felt. The first time I watched this movie, the whole time I thought for sure Poe and Finn are the heroes and Holdo was an idiot. Because like the movie was using every trope that I've seen a million times before, in which Holdo is always the idiot and our heroes, think of like even in Star Wars movies, everyone tells Han, "Don't go out after Luke. We order you not to do that." And he's like, "I'll see you in hell. I'm going to go rescue my friend." Captain America, "Screw you. I'm going to go rescue my friends." Like, that's the trope we get. Did you all kind of have the sense that Poe was wrong from the beginning, or did you also have that moment of like, oh, this is not the movie I thought it was?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think he was wrong from the beginning.
So, yeah, I think when I was watching it, I didn't have that reaction. Yeah, I agree with Ashley. Like, I thought he was wrong. Especially, like, there's a moment where, like, Rose and Finn come to Poe with the plan of, like, we got to get this code breaker. We can take their tracking down. And 3PO's like, "This sounds like something you should tell Holdo. Laura Dern. Yeah. The wonderful Laura Dern. And Poe's like, "No, this is on a need-to-know basis. She doesn't need to know." And it's like, at that point, I was like, nope, this is going to get you killed. This is going to get a bunch of people killed. Because we saw him disobey orders at the very beginning of the movie and get a bunch of people killed.
Yeah.
And also, like, when they're announcing, like, Leia's incapacitated, our leadership is obviously going to go to, and he does the, like, stand-up thing. I just was like, this ain't it, buddy. Like, sit down. You've just been demoted. It's clearly not you. Yeah.
But I do think, because movies are presented to us in this way where we kind of expect that if someone comes up with a plan, that the plan will work. That there was that in the back of my mind. That they went through all that trouble to go to Canto Bight and find a code breaker to get on board the Super Star Destroyer. And then, I expected that part of the plan to work.
Right.
Yeah. I like what it was. Vermilion 1 says, Poe is my least favorite new character. He does nothing and adds almost nothing to the series. And, like,
that's a bit strong.
I like Poe, but I agree that he does nothing, right? Like, I feel like he's... What I want, and this is, like, big and controversial, is, like, the Poe-Finn relationship that Disney is way too chicken to do.
Yeah. I mean, I pretty much saw it and just allowed I was like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You can take your narrative that way. I know what I saw.
Right, because, like, the relationship between Finn and Poe, even if it just stays as, like, a purely platonic relationship, which I agree in my head it's not, but it, like, him sort of acting as this mentor to Finn, and their friendship is, like, really wholesome, like, really nice to watch. So I don't want to just, like, throw Poe out whole stop, like, throw him out with the bathwater, but yeah. And I like his leader's journey, as Riki put it as well. Like, at the end when he's like, let's not just jump on our X-Wings and blow things up. It's like, oh, you learned a lesson.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like he is very important to the story for exactly that reason. I think he's also very pretty to look at, and that's certainly other thing he adds to the cast for those who are so inclined to that direction. But I also would agree, and it is one of my biggest frustrations about this movie in a way where I'm like, they do something wonderful that I now understand is for not great reasons. Because I do think that the Finn-Rose relationship is one of the best parts of this movie. Knowing, though, that part of why they did that is because originally there had been a lot of thought about Finn-Rey as a relationship, and that they wanted to shy away from that. And that they also wanted to give Finn something to do because they were saying, they originally were kind of thinking maybe Finn would also be a Force user, and then they were going to back away from that. And so it makes me like, okay, you created this great thing for a terrible reason. And I am, and especially knowing what they then do with both Finn and Rose's character in the third movie. Like,
yeah, I was like, what relationship?
I never want some later so it's one of those, like, I have such mixed feelings about their relationship. Let's go back to some of the main themes, though, because I think we started getting into it. Let's talk about how failure is a theme through this movie. Certainly more than any other Star Wars movie, and I think more than most, honestly, action movies I've seen. Like, all of our heroes fail in almost every big way. Like, there's some successes at the end, but it's really a meditation on failure. What was kind of your take on that, by the way that topic is presented?
I just know one of my notes I wrote, the fact that Yoda can still say something like failure is the greatest teacher and still shock the shit out of Skywalker is saying something about him as a teacher. He was like, I was like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, Vermilion 1 in the chat again is talking about how the biggest themes about this is trying something and failing, and that being, like, a part of life. And I agree. It is sort of this persistence, but then I think it's also this idea of knowing, not necessarily when to give in to failure, but, like, knowing when you're wrong and when to try something else, or, like, call it quits, basically.
I mean, one thing I'm really struck by is how often people fail in part because they're so terrified of failing, and because kind of what Yoda's saying, like, and to me, and this is only kind of hinted at, but for me, it really comes across very strong. Part of why Luke is so concerned is the one mentor the one example he's had of someone teaching him how to be a Jedi, well, at least one of two, is Obi-Wan, who says from the very beginning that Obi-Wan's failure in his attempt to teach Anakin is why Darth Vader happened. And I feel like that has to be such a big part of what is in Luke's mind going in, and why he is so afraid of failure. And that leads him to this terrible moment with Kylo, because he's just, there's no good answer. It's what do you do when you see should Obi-Wan have killed Anakin when he saw him going on the roof? I mean, obviously we know now that that was going to be a very difficult thing to do, but like, to me, it's just such an interesting sort of counterpoint to this whole conversation of Luke knowing, you know, the failure to be a good Jedi teacher is what led to Darth Vader. And so if he can't do it, maybe he should just not do it at all.
Yeah, but I think then in that, right, like he knows that this is what's led to that failure, but because of that knowledge, it causes him to like draw his saber, not on Kylo, but like have that moment that he talks about, the moment of weakness. And then Kylo sees that, and that's ultimately what pushes Kylo to the dark side. Like it seemed like Snoke seemingly already had like his paws on him, but it felt like that moment, right? That moment of Luke thinking like, okay, I know that failure is this thing. And like you said, being afraid of failure and like, I just need to end this now. I know that I just need to end this now. Is that ultimately what was like the final straw?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's very tough though, like in this universe, that if you are a Jedi Master and you fail, that's like a galaxy-wide catastrophe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Darth Vader, Kylo Ren scale. You know, why can't you just fail and have a student just like flunk out of your Jedi school and go home?
It's high stakes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's part of Luke's point, is that's part of why he's like, maybe we just shouldn't do this at all, you know, because if the stakes of failure are so high, is it better just to not do it at all?
Yeah, or even just like, I think his critique of the Jedi as a religion, like how he points out to Rey, like the Force is everywhere. It's not something that the Jedi own. It's not something that's going to go away if the Jedi go away. And so this notion of the Jedi putting such high stakes on things, right? Like you can't just flunk out of Jedi Academy and go home because like we kidnapped you when you were babies. So it's like
We'll throw you out when you're 17.
Exactly, right? Like it's not like you can be like, actually guys, this isn't for me later, right? It's like, no, you're being indoctrinated into this. That's what was decided.
And when a Jedi does decide to leave, they become Count Dooku.
Yeah.
We don't have a great example of people being like, yeah, peace out. I'll go do my own thing.
Didn't Ahsoka do that?
She does, but Luke doesn't know that story.
Or
which is
does
why,
he?
Well, it's why the single moment I most want out of some of the future Star Wars is the moment when Ahsoka learns that Anakin turned and like meets Luke, and yeah, I need that moment. That's a whole other conversation.
Sorry.
The part about religion, though, let's kind of jump to that, because I'll admit that is I think the theme that I love most about this, and I'll state my bias. I'm a former religious professional. I used to be a pastor. I'm very interested in organized religion, and I tend to think that what he says about the Jedi makes complete sense, and is a searing critique on what happens in organized religion all the time, you know, of where the people who are the religious authorities start to think that instead of them being the ones who point to the divine thing, that they are the divine thing, you know, and that like so many religious leaders in history have come along to say, like, you know, Jesus, Muhammad, like all these different like stories we have are about people being like, you're missing out on this. And I think, and Riki and Sarah especially, I'd love to hear from you on this, with Ashley as well. For me, what Luke says about the Jedi sort of makes me feel like everything in the Clone Wars is really now absolutely canon, like remembered canon, because it feels like what he's talking about of how the Jedi let Palpatine happen and they became so arrogant. Like the movies hint at it, but the Clone Wars really tell that story.
Yeah, I think watching the Last Jedi. So this is my first time rewatching it after having seen the Clone Wars, and there were a lot of things that I picked up on, partially because we're like going so deep into the Clone Wars and like dissecting it every week. But yeah, there's so much lore there, and like, yeah, this idea of the fall of the Jedi, especially like right now where we're at in the Clone Wars, which is the beginning of season 5. They're really starting to sort of see the cracks in the system as these Jedi as religious leaders stroke peacekeepers stroke politicians, and that they're becoming this like too big of an entity and like much more than what they should be. Is that kind of your read, Riki?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the fact that Luke named Sidious, he said the name Sidious in this movie was very significant, not just in, referencing a past character, but really connecting things in the way that you said, Matthew. So yeah, absolutely. I think Luke, I don't know how, I would have to think more about that, but he has a very good understanding of why the Jedi failed and why Sidious came to power. I guess he's been talking to ghosts, right?
Yeah.
Certainly possible. Certainly possible. So yeah, what else do y'all think about? So it seems one of the central questions of this movie then is, should the Jedi continue? And Luke, I think, kind of makes a very strong case in one direction. He kind of goes back on it, but obviously there's a lot of back and forth there. What's your kind of take on where how you feel about how that question is addressed?
I feel like Jedi with a whole lot of amendments, let them have wives. Let them, if they want to force lightning and they do it with, good intentions, let them do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that
they're too strict.
There are Venn diagrams of what it means to be a Jedi, and the smaller one, I guess, the Jedi Order as it existed during the Old Republic, absolutely should not continue, right? That failed in a, I guess, predictable way.
You guys created all your biggest villains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the idea of a bigger circle of Jedi, as people who use the Force to positively impact the galaxy, I think should. And it's a question of how then do you organize that group and, I guess, enforce your rules within that organization? Is it even an organization? Or is it just a loosely affiliated group of people who know each other and can use the Force?
Yeah. I think a lot of what Luke said about the Force just being this thing that exists and is inherent in everything, and it's not going to go away if the Jedi go away, can sort of be reversed. I don't think the Jedi are going to go away just because Luke has sequestered himself on this island. There's just too much there, and I've been reading. It's been coming up on my Facebook timeline with a few friends who are talking about this sort of evangelical atheism, with this idea of just supplanting one worldview for kind of the opposite, but being just as vitreous about it. I don't know if vitreous is the right word. Having just as much vitriol about it. And I think if you do just decide wholeheartedly abolish the Jedi, get rid of them entirely, then something is gonna come up, right? Either there's gonna be something like the Sith to fill that vacuum, or you're sort of getting rid of the sort of cultural touchstones that people need to sort of bring balance in the Force, balance in their life through this sort of sense of ritual. And I think you can have this sort of pluralistic ritual elements of Jedi as a religion without having, like you were saying, the strict code of you can't have wives, you can't have feelings. Also, we're senators.
All the rules that are going to turn you into a Sith.
Yeah, I've been trying to force you down this very, very narrow path, right?
I've been reading a number.
Yeah, I think you want a shared value system.
I've been reading a number of the books that are now set in the High Republic period, which is supposed to be the heyday of the Jedi, and almost every character in that book is having lust and love and is fighting against the restrictions, and it's very clear this is not just Anakin. And one thing I really got this time I watched the movie, because you're right, it's funny. I said before, there were a lot of things in this. Watching it again, I was oh, that's kind of a plot hole. That doesn't make sense. But I also picked up on a lot of other things that are really awesome. One of which I hadn't recognized until this time I watched it is Rey is angry for almost this entire movie. Rey is constantly demonstrating things that a Jedi is not supposed to demonstrate. And Luke especially gets very scared that she wants to go towards the dark side. And it to me, her character in this, I think, is really an indication of what you're talking about there, of her being, she's not what Obi-Wan or earlier Yoda would have said is what a Jedi should be, but now she is a Jedi. And it's again one of my things where I love it, but I wish they'd gone one step further. Yoda is one of the ones who's telling Luke, no, this Rey is what the Jedi should be. And I just wish he'd acknowledge, because I was wrong. It's funny that they talk so much about failure. Yoda has never acknowledged how much he failed in the creation of Anakin. you know, or he failed in trying to hold Luke back and stuff like that. But so I just thought that was really interesting that we constantly like seeing Rey do what a Jedi's not supposed to do, but clearly she gets the mantle of she is the Jedi. Luke won't be the last one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and even like someone pointed out in the chat again, like Luke also became a super powerful Jedi without being like a toddler. It seems like the most powerful Jedi weren't conscripted as toddlers, right? So this idea of like, well, are you indoctrinating too early? Are you holding them back from the Force? Is that done on purpose? Right? Like Rey didn't come into the Force until she was like, I don't know, what, like early 20s?
True.
Yeah, like
it's very much that religious idea again, you know, of like, do you need to make someone religious by like teaching them from birth? You know, you have to learn this religion. Or can you like find it yourself? You know, I mean, there's a whole debate in many religions about that, like believer baptism or in all, you know, Sunday school and all that kind of stuff. And I just love the way it's brought up here, especially because, and we'll be careful not to spoil anything, but there is another character who we will meet in a property that Riki, Sarah, and I will be talking about later in the year, who is, I think, one of the best examples of a Jedi we ever find, who's basically married, like is in a loving romantic relationship. So I think there's definitely a lot going on there of them sort of, you know, saying like, hey, you can be a different kind of Jedi.
Yeah, let them get married.
Yeah, well, because like this whole, like, the idea of feelings lead to attachment leads to frowny face, right? Yeah. Like, trying to suppress your feelings leads to anger, leads to fear, leads to
like therapy. I mean, like, I don't care about the person who told me to not care about people, but it's my master and I'm supposed to care about them. None of this makes sense.
Repression of feelings, and especially like forced celibacy and forced denial of love, I think we have a lot of instances, especially in religious settings, does not work out very well.
I will say, regarding Rey's anger and darkness that you talked about in this movie, one of the things on this rewatch that kind of disappointed me was the follow-up we get in Rise of Skywalker. You know, spoilers for that movie. Rey is Palpatine's granddaughter, I guess. And having that information and now coming back to this movie and seeing her darkness, I think it becomes easy to dismiss that as like a genetic thing, like genetic evil. Yeah. And I didn't like feeling that way about her. And I wanted her to be more conflicted, you know, just on her own merits.
I think there was, I agree. I think there was something like weird, something nice, I guess, with the idea of like Kylo being like Leia's son and he's bad, and like Palpatine is Rey's grandfather and she's good. So this idea of like flip-flopping lineages, but then also like, well, no, because Kylo is Vader's grandson, so like they're both evil. But yeah, I just
with a heart of gold totally underneath.
Yes, underneath those like magnificent abs.
You just gotta pull it out.
Your heart is not under your abs, but okay.
But I remember when we did the last Return of the Jedi rewatch, and I haven't seen that movie in so long. I remember just getting to the ends of it and being like, this is just this movie almost. They have the elevator scene, they have the same conversation, you know, he betrays Snoke, and I was like, wait a minute, what's happening here? And then when I watched all of them again and watched the new ones, I was like, hey.
Plus the Battle of...
Where's my original story?
It's like a lot of Return of the Jedi plus the Battle on Hoth. Except now sand is snow.
Blood snow.
I like your point, and I had a similar thing, and we'll talk about all our feelings about Rise of Skywalker when we get to that movie. But I feel like the other thing is, for me, my personal favorite moment for Rey is the fact that she comes from nowhere, that she's from nobody. Because for me, what that means is that I could be a Jedi too. Like that anyone could be a Jedi, because it's not about who your parentage are. It's not about your genetics or this midichlorian nonsense. It's about, you know, who are you?
Hottest pickup line ever. Yeah. You're nothing. Yeah. You came from no one. But you're something to me.
You know?
Yes. Yeah. Right.
Turn that around real quick.
Yeah, I was like,
it's 100% negging. You know, it's like you're nothing except I love you. Yeah, it's actually a great point.
It's like classic abuser tactics, and I was sitting on the couch like, oh, Kylo.
Tell me I'm nothing.
Yeah.
You don't kink shame here. But I think that also...
Tell me to shut up and sit down. Sorry.
Have some water. Yes, the thirst is strong. But I think for me, especially because you pair it with the other great moment in this movie that gets totally forgotten, when the young boy who is like remembering the story of Luke Skywalker just casually uses the Force to pull the broom to him. And it's funny, I completely missed that the first time I saw the movie until people pointed it out.
It's subtle.
So subtle.
It's very subtle.
But to me, it's so important because clearly that kid's not the son of Palpatine or Skywalker or Obi-Wan. He's just a kid because you can just be a person. And to me, it is such a beautiful part of this movie and of Rey's story that she can come from nowhere because it's... Yeah, and we'll get to why I hate the way it changed, but I think it's such a great part of her character in this movie.
And to like look at the bigger picture, if the most powerful if it's genetic and it's passed on, like then shouldn't the Jedi Order get married and have kids? Like shouldn't they be having some kind of
Create
program?
Your own tutor family. Have fun.
Yeah. So it makes much more sense that the Force, is in all living things. Right. And sometimes it just sparks stronger somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and also I like this idea of like her coming from nothing, being like her parents abandoned her because her parents sucked, and like, you know what, you had sucky parents, and that's okay. That doesn't define who you are. You can still be great even if your parents are jerks who just left you. But then it's like, oh, it turns out no, they did this for her own good. I'm like,
we will be doing another episode on Rise of Skywalker, and we will have some strong feelings all around there.
We all love it.
And the way all of that throne room scene, I mean, first off, is my favorite scene in the entire franchise. Wow, okay. Like the beauty of that fight scene is stunning. But
I always see one part where one guy goes to hit her and she's standing there and he has to stop and she drops down. Oh, and I'm like, ooh. But other than that, it was beautiful. His hair. Sorry.
No, it's good.
I'm real into choreography.
But also, like, the fact that I don't remember exactly how I felt the first time I watched it, but even now on these rewatches, knowing what's going to happen, there's still enough tension there of who's going to turn on who, like who's going to join who. Like they make it very believable that in that moment that you've been thirsting over Kylo, that she might take his hand right there. Yeah. And join him.
Well, I'm like, girl.
He said please. He's very polite. Yeah, but even this idea of like, I think, okay, not gonna rag on Rise of Skywalker. But yeah, like this idea of them as the sort of like power couple of the galaxy, of like her bringing him closer to the light, but also like him sort of disavowing her of this notion of like Jedi purity that sort of Luke was trying to get at as well. And also this idea of like your parents don't make you, I think could be applicable to Kylo too. It seemed like he just had to like he murdered his dad, right? Yeah. And he didn't murder his mom, but then his friends did, and he was like, no, okay. Or tried to, I suppose. But this idea of like your parents not defining you, I think they could have both like worked that out together.
He would have just helped her save the ships. Like, that's all you have to do. Just help her save the ships.
Mm-hmm.
And everything would have been fine. You could have been able to barter for that one little thing. You had the higher ground.
Like, I am on record as saying like that I like the idea of a team up between like the former Sith and the former Jedi. You know, I really wanted it with Ahsoka and Ventress. And I think, in that scene, I was so excited at that potential of exactly what you're saying, Sarah, of them like together feeling like, I'm rejecting the Sith, you're rejecting the Jedi. Is there some way to meet in the middle somewhat of like saying both of these systems are kind of broken and kind of extreme? And, again, it's like, I think there was still potential for that at the end of this movie. The other thing that I love so much about that scene, I mean, it's so beautiful. It's such a powerful moment for the two of them working together. But it's also, I just was talking before about Rey's emotional journey. It is where Kylo like switches like a light. Because one thing is that in all those scenes where him and Rey are joined, Rey is angry. He's totally calm. You know, she's yelling at him, how could you kill your father? How could you do this? And he's very like, this is interesting. I wonder how we're doing this. Like, and it's only until she rejects him that all that goes out the window. And I feel like there's such a direct line between him getting rejected there and then now him coming face to face with Luke, the other person who he feels completely rejected him, and just utterly losing his shit. You know, because he's like so imbalanced there. And it's all because of that scene with him and Rey. And I think there's so much of like, for him, Rey embracing him would have sort of been a like, you know, he wants Granddaddy Vader to embrace him, but apparently the ghost of Vader is never talking to him. He wanted Snoke to embrace him, but Snoke was negging him all over the place. He wants Luke to embrace him. And now Rey is his last chance, and she rejects him as well.
Yeah. I see what you're saying, although I kind of disagree with he's totally calm during their interactions when she's so angry. I think like he's cold, but I don't think he's calm.
That's fair.
Like, it's this purposeful, powerful, again, like, classic abuser tactic of, like, I'm over here, cool as a cucumber, and you're the one who's getting emotional. But, like, you can tell inside that he's, like, manipulative and, like, also, like, trying to piece together what's going on, but this idea of, like, he's enjoying toying with Rey.
That's fair.
Right? And in this sort of, like, power move. Like, I don't, as much as I thirst after Kylo, he's a jerk. Like, he's not a good guy.
Baby. We would have problems. Start smashing my stuff around. We'll see what happens.
There was a great article that went around when the movie first came out about comparing him to Vader is the perfect sort of understanding of, like, neo-Nazi online versus, like, actual fascism, in terms of, like, that Kylo he's not Vader. He's the whiny boy who's trying to be Vader, you know, who's trying to live up to that, but is so...
He's equally as whiny as Anakin, though. I'll give him that.
Fair. That's fair. Yeah, like James Earl Jones, that voice does not whine. That's not it's not his register.
But pre that, he was like, I hate them! I mean, you know what to see.
Yeah.
All the Skywalkers have their moments.
Gorgeous
I want to go to
whiny
Toshi Station.
Yeah.
I need power converters. Yeah, like, Riki and I were joking that we think that the Knights of Ren, is that what just the generic stormtroopers are called around the... No, those aren't fancy yet. The generic stormtroopers who are just wandering around the base probably have some sort of code word for when Kylo's, like, losing his poop.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just like, oh, he's pulled a Kylo again. Get the broom. Like, what's he smashed this time?
Maintenance crew to that
Don't
elevator.
make eye contact.
Is it in this movie or the last one where there's two stormtroopers, like, walking down a hall, they see Kylo going crazy and turn around and walk the other way?
They see the sparks coming out of the...
It's the previous one, yeah. But it's like, one of those stormtroopers is Daniel Craig, I think. Is that what?
Yeah, that's right. I just want to make a quick aside also about stormtroopers. We've complained numerous times about how stormtrooper armor stops nothing. Like, an Ewok can punch you, a laser blast, nothing. Captain Phasma, her armor stops a laser blast. So someone can build proper stormtrooper armor. They just choose not to. Anyway, my
Is she?
That's because Captain Phasma is a bleep bleep bleep.
MFing B?
Yeah, something.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And I'm so disappointed by the lack of use of Phasma in the entire trilogy.
Yeah,
and,
I think...
like, I guess she dies in this movie because she doesn't come back in the third movie.
I was like, did she fall into space? Like, I was really watching, like, is that what happened? Because it goes through the fire and there was a hole at the bottom of the ship was cut in half, right? So I guess we assume she's in space.
Yeah. So in the chats, wondering if she has Beskar armor. That's kind of what I was wondering too, because she does. I think they were trying to, like, make her into the new Boba Fett, but then, like, Traitor with the like weird spinny gun got way more, like, viral attention, and then so she even sort of makes a callback to that, right, with, like, calling Finn a traitor, trying to, I think, like, recapture some of that magic, but because, like, it felt forced, right? Like, they were trying to force Phasma to be this, like, virally cool sensation in the same way of like Aura Singh or Boba Fett, that it just like they didn't quite get there. They should have just given her lines and made her an actual character.
Yeah.
I wonder, this I don't know, but I wonder if it is in some ways tied to what happened to Finn's character. Because like often in movies like this, like each one of our heroes has their own sort of personal antagonist. And Phasma is very much Finn's antagonist, you know, with his whole journey of being the former stormtrooper and like all that stuff. And in some ways I feel like having her die in this movie, it just it's one more sign of like they didn't know what to do with Finn, you know, because that could have been such a big part of, especially since, I mean, one of the things I do like about the last movie is that they do go into this idea of like the stormtroopers who are rebelling and stuff like that. So yeah, just one more.
Yeah, and that would have been a perfect place to reintroduce Phasma. Yeah. And have her try to recapture them or kill them or whatever. Sure.
And like we all know that falling down a deep pit and even being cut in half doesn't necessarily mean you die.
Mean anything.
Haley Hobbs does point out in the chat that Beskar armor is very good against most things except when Obi-Wan punches you. Because that happens in Clone Wars. Yeah. But so
wait, what? When?
There's at least 1 or 2 points where he's fighting Mandalorians and he just punches them, and
he's just punching them. Well, Obi-Wan is very special.
Also very true. The power of snark and sass. That's
he's just so sassy. They're emotionally wounded.
So the one last theme I wanted us to talk about, and then let's go into some of the specific characters, is this idea of mythology and legend. Because obviously it's something that Luke especially is really feeling, and it's funny, even in the opening scrawl, you know, it says that, like, everyone, all these rebels are just thinking, like, if only Luke shows up, everything will be okay again. And on the one hand, Luke is very opposed to that, and he at one point says, like, the reason he failed is because he's just Luke. He's not Luke Skywalker, the great Jedi Master, you know? And it feels like the movie is kind of going back and forth on this question, because on the one hand, it's very critical of the dangers of myth and legend, but then at the end, like, this wonderful moment of hope is that little kid telling the story of Luke Skywalker. What do you kind of take away from this in terms of, like, what the movie's having to say and what you think about the role of legend and mythology and how that's helpful or harmful?
Yeah, I don't think those are two opposing points. I think it's mostly, like, not believing your own hype, I guess. Like, this idea of knowing myth and legend as myth and legend, and then believing you are legendary and mythical, right? Like, so Luke Skywalker is like just a dude, but the story of Luke Skywalker is very important. And then, like, as soon as Luke started believing that he was the story, right? As soon as the Jedi started believing that they were the Force, that's when this breakdown happens.
Right.
Yeah, you need, like, legend type stories to inspire people in a conflict like this. And a lot of the comic books that take place between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back are about Luke's journey and growing as a rebel and a Jedi, but it's also about him just, like, going around and kind of, like, inspiring people and saying, like, hey, yeah, like, I'm the one who blew up the Death Star, like, join the rebellion. So he's kind of like Captain America-ing it up, like the first part of Captain America.
I love that.
Yeah, it's a great connection, because that's, I think, in the same way, like, Cap fights against that somewhat. I just recently rewatched Avengers, and I'd totally forgotten that there's a moment where, Coulson says, okay, well, we have your suit, and Cap says, like, isn't the Stars and Stripes kind of hokey? Like, he doesn't want to put on the suit to be Cap again. And Craig says that maybe people need that inspiration. So yeah, I like that point, that it's about kind of finding that balance of how do you do both of those things.
Yeah. And in this movie, I mean, when Rose meets Finn, she gushes on about him and, like, the role he played in blowing up Starkiller Base. And he's like, no, like, that I'm nobody, like, it's no big deal. Because he kind of knows, like, how little he did, or, you know, how lucky they all got in that situation. Yeah. But we can see how the stories of how Starkiller Base was destroyed have spread and have inspired people.
Yeah. And I think that's a great scene, because it's a great double-edged sword. Because the fact is, you know, Rose is saying, like, if you are part of this military organization and you leave, that is desertion. You know, that is a crime. Finn never signed up. Finn never made any commitment. And to me, like, maybe I'm sort of being overly sympathetic, I think he has every right in the world to get in an escape pod and peace out and go try to rescue the other Jedi. And I think there's something really interesting there about Rose is holding him to a standard of this myth and legend that really should never have been applied to him.
Yeah. And I think she's also like grieving the loss of her sister as well, who was like died in the line of duty, right? And this very honorable like self-sacrifice. And I think she's trying to hold everybody to that standard now, and that might just be part of her grief.
I think that's true. That's true. I think the other reason why this whole idea of the legend and mythology point really echoed for me is it does feel like a lot of this movie is about, and Riki, I think you were saying this at the beginning, just challenging. It's kind of a meta point, because it's not only about how in this universe people should do it, but there's also an element of like, hey, you fans, how much are you putting these people on pedestals and not treating them as real people? You know, and that I think gets into all the stuff they show about Luke, but also there's so many wonderful little comments in here about, Yoda saying like, you know, that we have to grow beyond the past and we have to trust the next generation, you know, to be not what the past was. And Kylo, like, I mean, one of the only things that I agree with him that he says to Rey is, you know, kill the past, forget about it.
Yeah, if he wasn't literal about that, I think she would have taken his hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, do you think that there is some kind of a meta point there of like, you know, because part of what Rian Johnson is doing is really breaking away from a lot of the fan expectations of these movies and saying like, that's, you know, the past movies are great, but these are new ones and they're growing beyond, and that's okay. And we should let go of wanting everything to be, you know, the Luke that we wanted and the Han that we wanted and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think those 2 points that you brought up, Matthew, Yoda at one point says something like, we are what they grow beyond, I believe, in discussions of Rey and future potential Jedi. And then, of course, Kylo is saying, like, kill the past or destroy the past. But both of them are applying the same kind of logic that when it's time for the new generation to take over, that you have to, like, build upon what the past has brought you to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Kylo wants to destroy it and move on, and Yoda's saying like, let them grow beyond you, and that's how they will become even greater.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I think that's a great point about the meta aspect of this movie and this trilogy, and why I have so much love for it is that it has built upon everything I've loved since being a child, and has added these elements that I can appreciate as an adult now and kind of grow beyond the childish elements of what I enjoyed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I agree, and I think maybe one of the reasons why I'm sort of disillusioned with this movie is because like the next movie undermines this point so much. And it just like feels bad. Especially with the whole, like with Kylo explicitly saying to Rey, like, your parents are no one. You're nothing. Right? And this idea of, like, directly being told, Rey is not special. Rey does not have some sort of fancy lineage. We're telling you this directly. Let go of that idea that she's going to be related to these past movies in any way, shape, or form. And then the next movie is like, JK lol, she is.
Yeah.
And I feel like that, like, just breaks it down. And like Riki was saying, I like that message a lot of like, this is its own thing. You've gotta like let it be its own thing, and kill the past, build on the past before.
And like I don't want to get too much into like the fan debates over this movie, and I think it's very possible to have legitimate concerns about this movie and dislikes of this movie and not be a toxic fan by any means. And I think even like you know, there are I think people with very legitimate opinions who just don't like what they did with Luke in this story, and I think that can be totally legitimate. But I think in many ways the point we're talking about now is kind of exactly where the toxicity came from. Like, because there were, for a lot of people who had a very specific idea of like, you know, I don't want to see a girl Jedi, I don't want to see a black Jedi, I don't want to see, you know, Luke being weak. In some ways, like, that whole idea of like, let go of the past and be willing to let there be new things really kind of resonates for me in that.
Yeah, so Vermilion One talking about how it says Kylo is using hubris and anger to move beyond his teachers, whereas Yoda is telling Luke, our time has passed, step aside in humility to allow the next generation to take their path. And yeah, like, I think because Kylo is a Sith, you know, we are familiar with the rule of two, the only way for you to move past your master and become a master yourself is to kill your master.
Yeah.
So he is kind of like holding to that tradition.
Well, and I think actually you're both making a fantastic point I haven't figured out until this moment. I mean, I think it's very easy for us to say, like, Kylo should have done that, but Luke didn't let him. Luke was doing exactly the problem. He saw his student doing something wrong and jumped to this bad place. And you know, and one thing I both love about this movie so much, but makes it so hard to talk about, is the way it uses that Rashomon technique of, like, we're going to show you that same scene 3 different times and never actually tell you the truth of it. And for me, it's both a brilliant filmmaking technique because it's a great, like, look at the idea that, like, you know, when I tell you a story from my past, I cannot possibly tell you what exactly happened because, like, you know, your emotions will always color your memories. And so I love that. But it also makes it harder to discuss, like, how wrong was Luke, because we don't know exactly what happened, because no one will know exactly what happened. And it's both frustrating, but I think that's the point, and that's why I love it so much.
Good point.
Yeah.
Go on.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Let's go into some of the specific characters. I think we've talked a lot about them, so we can kind of just touch on them quickly and see if there's anything more about their journeys we want to talk about. First with Rey. What do you kind of think of Rey's journey and where she goes as a character in this movie?
I don't love Rey as much in this movie as I did in the previous one, and I'm getting all the acronyms confused. This is Last Jedi, and that one was Return of the
Rise.
Rise of the Force Awakens. Gosh.
The Force rises.
The Force of Skywalker arises. I do it too. Yeah. Oh gosh. But yeah, I think it's because she's so indoctrinated, I guess, in this, or like so adherent to this idea of like Luke Skywalker, the legend, right? And like he even points out to her, like, do you think I came to this hard to get to island in the middle of nowhere that I've erased from all maps because I wanted you to come find me? Like, yeah, what you doing here, girl? Right? And just like her being so adamant about it, that like, no, this is right. I'm not leaving until you come with me. And then when she goes into the cave and is like seeing all those reflections of herself and then instantly comes back and is like, hey, Kylo Ren, leader of the Knights of Ren, let's have a chit chat about this. Cause like I saw stuff and I felt power and like, what do you think? Right? Like that's, you're making some bad decisions, right?
Yeah. But I also think it's an interesting meditation on...
I'm just going to jump in my pod. Hang on. She's just like, I'm going to jump in my pod because I think this is a good idea. I'm going to get there and he's just going to take my hand and everything's going to be fine. I was like, what?
Well, it's funny. This is a weird metaphor I'm going to use, but I think it applies to many other things. But like when debates happen about like, should we teach kids sex ed and stuff like that? One of the comments is often, I used to be a big proponent of sex ed professionally. I still am in my own life. But one of the points that we often make is if you don't try to teach kids, someone else is going to. And they're often going to learn it from the worst places.
Right.
And there's kind of something here. Like, Rey turns to Kylo because Luke won't teach her. Mm-hmm. She's just had this incredible... And I think that's kind of the genius of Snoke, is that, you know, somehow Snoke understands that Rey is going to get rejected and not, you know, she turns to Luke and says, help me, and he won't. And so she turns, like, I think you're right. She's idiotic to turn to Kylo, but I also understand, like, you have all this knowledge and here's the one person who will talk to you about it.
And he's so dreamy.
He's so dreamy. Also true. I think Kylo's character we've talked about a good deal. Is there any other kind of points you want to make about Kylo's character arc, or we can move on?
Well, I just want to say, like, the actor, Adam Driver, fantastic. And not just, like, in his line delivery, but the intensity with which he fights with his lightsaber. There's just something magical about it, and I just love it so much.
Yeah, honestly, I'm, like, pretty sure the reason I crush so hard on Kylo Ren is because I'm just crushing on Adam Driver.
Yeah, me too.
I watched Girls.
I have a thing for that, though. Like, the Loki's, the dark hair, the real pale skin, super whiny. I can probably mold you to what I want you to be because you have a troubled childhood. Let's do this.
Yeah, so I can fix you. I like a project. It's good. Yeah.
Look, David Bowie as the Goblin King. Like, that set a good bar. You know, we're all going for Also, I'm enjoying that you can see the position of the sun in the sky out my window by how much darker my video is getting.
Yeah, I think similar is happening to us here.
Yeah, you're in gorgeous light now.
But you're right. I think I mean, all the conversation we had about the subtlety that Kylo was showing and how manipulative he is, but in these very subtle ways, I think is down to Adam Driver. And I think it's also part of why some of the scenes that don't feel very subtle, like Canto Bight, is a scene that I feel like I've really kind of changed my mind on in a lot of ways. I love the idea of it. I love the concept of it. There's no subtlety to it whatsoever. And I think it to me, that becomes even more of a glaring problem when you look at things like how well Adam Driver is acting that role.
Yeah.
And things like that.
He puts his all into it, and I appreciate it because he's a good actor. I like most of the things he's in, and you know, I know he feels whatever way about doing this role, but I will give him he put everything into it, and he was really going for it, and I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Vermilion, I wanted to also mention, is going back a bit, but I think Yoda realized that as well after teaching Luke, because Luke had left him on Dagobah and grew beyond his masters, which I think is a really great point. And Vermilion, if you're attempting to make an application that you be a future guest on the Star Wars podcast, we're signing you up. So you've been voluntold. So let's go to Luke, who I think obviously this is kind of one of the most controversial in terms of some people love his character in this, some people hate it and think it's not at all right. Where do you all take on Luke's journey? I'm
in the love category.
Yeah.
Yeah, Luke in this movie was everything I didn't know I needed. I think that's the best way to put it.
I just love Mark Hamill. No, I love him so much, and I loved everything about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think...
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think the brilliance of making us wait, what was it, 2 years after having, like, Rey extend the saber back to him.
The memes that were on the internet with that saber.
Yeah, and then, exactly. Actually, just him, like, chucking it over his shoulder, right? Like, this is not... I am not what you built me up to be. Is amazing,
I didn't need to see him drinking that gross milk.
That was a power move, yeah.
I'm good. I didn't need that in my life, and it's probably one of the top 3 things I remember from the film.
It doesn't bother me the way it bothers everyone else.
Of course it doesn't.
I didn't remember it, and I don't know if it's because I like repressed it, but definitely watching it again, like him making eye contact with her, I'm just like,
and just like takes a swing, just like delicious.
Yeah. It's my blue milk is my heritage.
He is very angry about it, that's for sure. Like, the aggressive like blue milk in his beard. But no, I think I'm with you all. To me, I don't see how Luke could get to any place but this, to be honest. Like, because he is the legend now. He is the mythology. And I don't, and maybe this is me sort of wanting too much realism in my movies, and people, I totally respect if you want the idea of the hero who just is the perfect hero through the rest of their life. To me, that's not something I can believe in. Like, you know, and even in the world of laser swords and the Force and all this, I still want characters who feel relatable, you know?
Yeah.
In some ways, it's kind of the DC versus Marvel idea of like, Marvel is, you know, heroes you can relate to. DC is like, the characters are like demigods. You're not supposed to relate to them. I want Luke as a Marvel character. And I think just where he goes with it, and especially the redemption he gets, because, I mean, to me, that the confrontation he has against Kylo is everything. Like, because he's not the person who comes back and says, Kylo, I can rescue you. And it's funny because I do feel like, I don't think Kylo gets to where he does by the end of Rise of Skywalker without this scene, because I think this is such a like pinprick to his ego and such a challenging moment for him. But just like, Luke is mean. Luke's a bully in this. Like the whole like brushing the dust off of his shoulder, which isn't there because he's not there, and like everything you just said is wrong. It just feels so perfect where Luke would have gotten to at this point, where he isn't just going to go back to the guy who confronted Vader, who was like young and naive and had all these great ideas.
Starry-eyed.
He's a very different person, and he's going to do it in a very different way.
Yeah, and like so much has gone down in this like interim period. Like I really, especially watching The Mandalorian, right? Everyone's seen The Mandalorian, right? We all know. Yeah. Having like Luke come and collect Grogu, like something has happened between then and now, right? Where he's lost little baby Yoda, was he like one of the kids that Kylo killed? Maybe, who knows? But yeah, I love his journey as well, and I think like this grumpy eccentricness is sort of like an honest acquisition of him, especially like because this is sort of what Yoda did. Like Yoda was the ultimate troll, and Luke's just like picking up on that. But I think he still has a little bit of that like naive, like starry-eyed optimism, I think, and especially we see it when he goes to burn down the tree.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, and then Yoda is just like, screw it, and lights it on fire, and he goes to like run in and like, oh no, that tree actually meant something. I was just having a like moment here. I just needed to get some aggression out. I didn't actually want to light it on fire. Yeah. And then he gets to this point of like, okay, no, we gotta let the past burn, right? And still has so much to learn from Yoda. And then, confronting Kylo, and then just like letting go after that, right? Like he's helped his friends, he's bought them time. Poe realized it, which is great, instead of running out there and blowing things up. And also like, this Kylo confrontation, I totally agree. Like I don't think Kylo could have got to where he did without it. Partly like I think he just needed that like huge rage explosion. Like he needed to get that aggression out, because like Luke didn't serve him well, right? No. Like he could have done a lot more for him, and he didn't. And I don't think that necessarily makes like Luke bad and Kylo right. But like, right, he still felt let down by Luke, and I think he needed to like express that, I guess.
I feel like there's still so much story missing from that part of the story that we just never, maybe it's in books or comics and I don't know, but like where were your parents? Like I mean, I know that Luke, you know, hurt you, but if you would have gone back to your mom and dad, I'm sure, I don't know, I need more of that story. I know Snoke was involved, and I know that there was a lot of background stuff happening, but I just need a little bit more.
Yeah, and there's like clearly something going on with like Han and Leia, and like did their marriage fall apart
because of
Kylo, or is it like exactly? Yeah.
Was she like, I'm going to be a single mom? You get out of here. I'm doing it myself. You like,
I'm a general. Yeah.
I mean, it is, and this is more on The Force Awakens, but it's on all of them. You know, my frustration about how little we know about the time between, you know, Return of the Jedi and this is, and I do like. I mean, I don't want to watch a movie that is like, you know, young Ben and Luke, but I like that we are going to get so much new content set in that time period, and I hope that it is going to start to fill in these gaps, you know, and that Luke will get to hear like Luke talking with Grogu and Ahsoka and all that kind of stuff. Like I think there could be so much there to explore. Like I said, I need Ahsoka to know what happened to Anakin.
I know.
So let's talk about Finn and Rose. We talked about them somewhat. Like, what's your take on kind of those two characters and their arc together?
I mean, just the characters, I think, is a reasonable arc. I mean, obviously we don't get any payoff in the next movie, which is disappointing. But I think as a midpoint of a potential romantic arc, this was a good one. And it ends like ambiguous enough that I guess you could just wipe it all away.
Yeah.
But I think bigger picture, like beyond the plot of the movie itself, like real world stuff, obviously it's really disappointing. You know, John Boyega came out and was very critical of the way his character was handled, and I think we can all see that. And also with Kelly Marie Tran, Rose's actress, like
that poor girl.
This could have been like a real big thing between them, you know, and it just didn't go anywhere. I think that's disappointing as a fan.
Yeah. I think like I like both their characters. I didn't like this arc. And even the idea of like pairing them together, I still am not super comfortable with that. And partly because it's like the idea of seeing minorities as the only viable romantic option for other minorities is like frustrating.
And you kind of set up a relationship in the first movie and you just have him kind of like brush that aside to, spoiler alert, do the same thing in the next one. Like poor the writers.
Finn had such insane chemistry with Rey and insane chemistry with Poe, and so you could choose either of them, or hey, polyamory, all three of them as a triad. That's my own canon. But like, yeah, and so it's sort of like I love so much about the Rey thing. the Rey story also is, I think, where I feel a lot of the poor execution of things in this movie really stand out. Like, again, like, the Canto Bight scene has so much potential. But, like, the idea that, like, yes, Las Vegas, like, the oil industry is awful and terrible. Not every single rich person is part of any one industry, and they all, like, the way that the arms industry thing is pushed, and, like, just that everyone in Canto Bight, granted, I'm a gambler, I like going to casinos, I want to hope someone at Canto Bight isn't terrible. but just, like, and also just little details of, like, why didn't they just legally park when they got to Canto Bight? That would have made everything so much easier,
right?
Like,
they were in a hurry. Yeah.
Or even just, like, that moment at the very end. I think the implication is supposed to be that Finn wouldn't make it. That Finn was just going to die for nothing, and so that Rose stops him because, like, that great line, we protect what we love, we don't destroy what we hate. But the way I watch that scene, I feel like Finn was going to destroy it and thus save everyone.
Yeah,
and
me too.
Like, why did you stop? And I feel like they wanted us to feel that. They just didn't execute it well. And so every time I watch the Finn and Rose story, I think in part because also what happens later, it just is frustrating to me because they're both amazing actors. They're wonderful characters. I just think they're not given the credit they should have gotten.
Yeah. Just to touch on... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to...
No, you go.
Okay, to touch on the, like, Rose stopping Finn thing. Like, I think that is the point. I think he was going to make it, and he was going to sacrifice himself, and he was going to save everybody. But that's bad, right? Like, we saw that in the beginning, like, yeah, they blew up... Oh. Sorry, she's a little sick, so she's been extra cuddly. My cat just walked across my lap for anyone who is listening to this afterwards. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so we saw at the beginning, right, with the bombers sacrificing themselves. Like, they did it. They got rid of those gunships. They completed their mission, but they all died. And like that, and like what Leia was saying, right? Like, dead heroes, no leaders. Yeah. Like, that's not a good thing. And I mean, and we kind of get it, like, countermanded with Laura Dern just light blasting herself through all these ships at the end. Yeah, exactly. So it feels a little bit like mixed message, but yeah, what Rose says of, like, we don't win by destroying what we hate. We're sacrificing ourselves to destroy what we hate. Like, we win by protecting what we love, which includes ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Do you think that Rose would rather have her sister back, right? Or this dreadnought destroyed?
I guess, though, for me, it does feel like you said a very inconsistent message, because Luke literally dies to do, like, Luke sacrifices himself. And I guess to me the stakes of destroy one dreadnought versus, like, literally stop the rest of the resistance from being wiped out because they don't know. And granted, I maybe I have a very skewed perspective on this because, like, I think Captain America's wrong. You do trade lives. Like, sometimes trading lives is the right thing to do. So I maybe have just a very cynical perspective on this, but it's helpful to know that that even if you see that he would have made it, that there is an argument for what she says.
Yeah.
And I don't think Luke knew that he was going to sacrifice himself. Like, I don't think he knew if that was even going to work. Like, that type of exertion in the Force.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess I see Luke less as a sacrifice and more as, like, I have done my part. It's time to go, so let the others grow beyond me. Not like if he was actually physically there, and then, like, let Kylo saber him in half, then I think it'd feel differently than him just, like, providing a distraction, providing an outlet for Kylo.
Yeah,
and then, like, letting go and, like, becoming one with the Force.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Dusted.
That's definitely fair.
Yeah.
You were going to say a bunch of stuff, Ashley, and we cut you off a bunch of times.
Oh, yeah.
Well, no, it's actually probably not a very... Do you think if they would have had Finn, like, with what they ended up doing with his character, if they would have had him sacrifice himself and that's how they got out, would that have been a better character arc than we ended up getting by the end of these 3 movies?
Gosh. Knowing what we got, probably. Which is, like, sucky to say because
that's what we were talking about earlier. I was like, I wonder if he would have just gone here.
The black guy has to die to save all the white people. Definitely doesn't feel like a good move. But yeah, I mean, it's at least he gets something, and he gets an interesting character arc in the 3rd movie. I think.
Does.
It's just that there's no connection to what happened. Like, it feels like Finn is 3 different characters in these 3 different movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
yes.
totally. 100%.
I just want him to be a Jedi. Like I think,
Yeah, just be one.
Yeah, you know. So I think kind of that hits most of the characters we wanted to talk about. Like I mentioned Poe, but I think we've gotten into a lot. So I was now going to go over into kind of like just random things, like which other like little moments that like stood out for you as either things you loved or didn't love, or just interesting thoughts about the movie.
I got a lot of questions about shooting that ship through those other ships like that, because why doesn't everybody just do that?
Okay, so
there are just some things you should not delve into the science of, and I think time travel is one of them.
Gravity and
just
space.
Don't ask about how time travel works in these movies. And I think like light speed / hyperspace / whatever is another one, because like it just doesn't make sense. Like, and if you try to make it make sense, there's a very famous Star Trek Voyager episode where they go past warp 10 and they become lizards or salamanders.
Oh gosh, yes.
And it just makes it worse.
So bad. Yeah, I mean, in those High Republic novels I keep talking about, they do make a lot of it about the science of hyperspace. And I think it's such a poor idea.
Yeah,
because you're right. It
doesn't make sense.
If you think seriously about that what Admiral Holdo does, it doesn't make much sense. It is also, I think, perhaps the single most powerful moment in any Star Wars property I've ever seen.
Yeah,
like, it is just, it's so gorgeous. It's so powerful. The silence of it is just like 30 seconds of the most beautiful, brilliant movie making I've ever seen. And you're kind of right. And that's why, like, I'm kind of a little frightened. Like, every time I watch it now, I'm not just like,
and then
oh my
10
God.
minutes later, you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah. In the same way that I'm like, she looks amazing, and I'm so glad of this vision of like someone who's like dressed in a like evening gown,
lavender for days.
And then I kind of wonder like what was the dinner ball that she was dressed for and got pulled away from in the middle of this like resistance thing? What was happening on that other ship while they were all doing this?
And when the ship's going down, you put on your best.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like in so many ways too, like she had to die to like prove to Poe that she was serious.
I don't like that.
I don't like that at all either. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like we can't like looking too much into the science of this, right? Like there's no gravity in space. That's a thing that apparently exists briefly and then stops again.
Bombers make no sense whatsoever. I remember I was working at a game store when this movie came out, and we got this wonderful spoiler because a week before the movie came out, we got this box of like for the X-Wing miniatures game. We got the bombers miniatures, and we were all standing around going like, "This is awesome. How does a bomber make any sense in space where there's no gravity?" It's just ridiculous.
Well, and it's not just that, like, they open the whole bottom of the ship to, like, the vacuum of space, and Rosa's sister is just, like, sitting there breathing just fine, like...
Yeah. And I guess you could sort of maybe argue that they're, like, still close enough to the planet that maybe they're within the planet, like, they're in orbit, and the planet's gravity is affecting them somehow, but it's... Then bombers seem a very limited ship in that regard.
Yeah, I think this is another thing where it's like, just look at how pretty it is and don't think too much about how the science works.
Yeah.
One cool little bit of trivia that I found, I did my watch of this last night with my friend Susan, and she told me this. Do you guys know why the Porgs are there?
To be
because they're adorable.
Because they wanted to sell a bunch of toys.
All this is true. But all of those scenes were shot on this island off the coast of Ireland that's a wildlife preserve. And then, among other things, is home to hundreds of puffins.
Puffins, right?
And they wanted to, like, they were very strict instructions. They could not move the puffins off of the island.
So they just, like, slapped over like a sticker?
Oh, dang.
That's amazing.
So that like, when I saw the Porgs, I was like, I don't need this. Like, you know, Chewbacca tossing him around is kind of fun, but we don't need this. But then when I knew that, I was like, okay, that's
adorable.
That's a wonderful little story.
That's so good. And like I mean, I love the Ewoks. I like the Porgs. I love the Porgs, right? Like I'm all for the cutesy little like, yes, please tell me the stuffed animal of this.
Yeah.
But yeah, knowing that it's like they're just legit puffins.
That's so cute.
Right. Other little things that I had, and like we can discuss them, and then people throw out others. Where's Han? Is because I hadn't even thought about it going into this movie, that at some point Luke has to learn that Han is dead. Oh. And then just when he sees Chewbacca come off the Millennium Falcon and then asks where's Han, it was just such a powerful moment.
Yeah, someone in the chat's pointing out Lost Cats. Yeah, Lost Cats also adorable. Yeah, I agree, and it's like it's weird because like you don't think that Luke would have felt it in the Force.
That's what I was thinking. I was shocked.
Well, but he cut himself off from the Force.
True.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Force
so just
denier.
Yeah, that moment I thought was brilliant, and then also when R2-D2 shows that Kylo Ren has nothing on him in terms of manipulation, because that moment of like nothing will get me, and then showing the tape of Leia saying "I need you, you're my only hope." It was just so brilliant and such a cheap move and so good.
Yeah, R2's my favorite character by a long shot.
Yeah.
What are other little moments that stood out for you as either good or bad that you wanted to mention?
So one thing I didn't notice until this rewatch, when Luke shows up on Crate and faces off against Kylo Ren, one of the clues that he is not actually there is when they show their feet, across the salt, and it changes from white to red when Kylo shifts his feet, and then it doesn't when Luke does. So that was something I think I noticed maybe on the second watch, and then it took till this watch that I noticed Luke's hair is shorter in those scenes in the same style as in the flashbacks of the Jedi Temple.
Yeah, it's brown as well instead of gray.
Yeah, and his facial hair is completely trimmed.
Yeah.
He has more like a goatee
and
of the wild.
And it adds a little more to the dialogue that he has with Leia about her changing her hair.
Oh, he Force younged himself. I didn't know that the Force could do that. I have to read everything.
I'm going to Force project myself.
Myself is like young and attractive.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's also like this is how Kylo last saw him, right?
Yeah.
So he's showing up and that's for him.
Yeah,
and the you changed your hair is also a nod to like what Han said to Leia when they meet. But I think also like talking about like no, because I didn't realize that Luke was just a Force projection when he first shows up, but like the way that Leia kind of looks up at him confused, and then like he leaves Han's little like trinket in there, it's like, oh, okay, that's just what she was confused about. But it's like no, he's a hologram, and so she's confused about him not touching. Exactly.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'll admit it, when I go back, this to me is another piece of brilliant movie making. When like I go back and watch it now, and I see this obvious shot of Kylo's feet in the sand and the Luke's feet in the sand, and I'm like, how in the world did I miss this? This is so obvious. And when I watched it the first time, I had no idea. Completely missed it. And to me, that is brilliant filmmaking.
Yeah.
Which is, again, why this movie is so, like, how do you do that? And then also have the Canto Bight scene, which again, had so much good in it, but...
Yeah.
Ups and downs.
You had another thing about the crate.
What about it?
The battering ram.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know how I like my tech stuff. And when they bring out the battering ram cannon, Finn talks about it and he says that it's miniaturized Death Star tech. And I just question that. Like, I don't know that that's correct because they're very dissimilar types of lasers. And then it's like, are you telling me that this thing is powered by Kuiper crystals? It seemed like maybe either Finn didn't know what he was talking about and kind of made it up, or that's just what they tell people, but it's not really Death Star tech. Yeah.
Death Star tech insofar as it like shoots a laser at something.
Yeah. It's like
it's a big laser.
Death Star tech at this point.
Yeah, that moment seemed a little odd. Haley Hobbs pointed out another cool thing, that in that standoff, Luke is projecting himself using Anakin's saber. Which is a kind of neat one more little thing of like, Kylo, you keep thinking that you're the heir to Vader. I'm his son. I rescued him. I got him.
That's really cool. I didn't notice that at all.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is something interesting. I never put this together either, but that there's such, for Kylo to fixate on, Grandpa Vader as the person he looks to is such a complete rejection of Luke as a mentor. Because Luke literally, like, killed Vader to bring back Anakin. And Kylo is basically trying to undo what Luke did because he thinks Vader's the one to remember. That's just another fun connection.
Yeah. And I think, like, you mentioned earlier, why doesn't, like, Anakin come talk to Kylo as a Force ghost? Like, I think it's because of that rejection of Anakin, right? Like, Kylo doesn't want to talk to Anakin. Kylo wants to talk to Darth Vader.
Exactly. Oh, I like that.
Yeah. No, I think and that's helpful because honestly, kind of like hyperspace, Force ghosts are one of, like, for me, one of the problems with power is if you establish that a power can be used, now you have to ask, why isn't it used all the time?
Yeah.
You know, like, if time travel's real, then nothing bad should ever happen ever. Because, like, you can always go back and fix it. You know, if you can bring someone back, like, if you can bring someone back from the dead, why don't you do it all the time? And there is sort of an element of, like, why aren't Force ghosts always coming in to tell people things? But I like at least that of, like, Anakin's like, this kid ain't my grandson. What the hell is this kid?
Yeah. Yeah.
One other little moment I wanted to share. I hadn't thought of this before, but watching the basically like the Empire's version of BB-8. I think he should now be known as BB Evil.
He is.
He stole his ship.
It's BB-9E,
and the
E
stands for evil.
Stands for evil.
Oh, that's true. That's so true. I never thought of that before.
But yeah, I love evil BB-8. He's adorable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I love BB-8's trash can disguise and how upset evil BB-8 gets at that.
So good. So
He's
good.
like, I see
Oh, and just that scene where they infiltrate and like steal the uniforms where the iron comes down.
Oh yeah.
And it looks like a starship.
Yeah,
Detail.
that iron moment was both like so random and so beautiful. One other little thing I picked up, and I hear from you all on some of these, and again, it's such a random thing because it's a reference to a not very well known movie from the 80s, I think, or maybe early 90s. But did any of you see the movie Enola Gay?
Yes.
Enola Gay was a perfectly nice movie about a bomber, in World War II flying its last mission. And there's just one little moment where one of the gunners shoots down one of the Nazi fighters, and he's like, celebration, great. And then the Nazi fighter, as it's like crashes right into one of the other bombers, one of their friends. And like, and there's a moment in that bomber scene where they shoot down a TIE fighter, and then the TIE fighter crashes into another one of the bombers, which then sets off like this chain reaction that kills a couple of other bombers. And maybe I'm just drawing a connection, but it was so similar. I was like, you're referencing an obscure movie from the 80s that most people have never heard of. I love that. That's so beautiful. So what about for you all? Any other like last little moments you wanted to comment on, or things you really liked, or things you didn't like as much? Or
I really liked the humor in this, and I know that was maybe another thing that people were upset about, but like Poe crank calling Admiral Hugs.
Yeah,
Hugs.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love him.
Hux.
I don't think he gets enough credit. Like, he just crushes that sniveling evil villain. I love him so much. I love his voice.
Yeah.
He's always right. Nobody's listening to him.
And I love that, like, his entire reason for, like, betraying the First Order is just, like, these people don't like me enough. Like, I'm sick of Kylo's stuff.
Listening to me!
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, in some ways, we keep talking about how, like, the rebellion people need to like let go of the past and like let the new people take over. The Empire is kind of the dark mirror image of that, where the kids are running the show. Who are the two most powerful people in the First Order? Two spoiled kids who haven't grown out of their adolescent teenage I want phase,
Yeah.
And Snoke, but yeah, then he's dead, yeah.
Well, right, but Snoke's dead. And because to me what makes that scene with Hux so good is his reaction. Like, any other person would have been like, okay, this guy's pranking me, just shoot him out of the sky now.
Even at the end, you're right, because he's just like, you would think he'd be like, yes, go out there and take on that guy who just survived all those blasts. But he's actually like, supreme leader, you don't want to, don't lose focus. And then he just gets bitch slapped. Yeah, and it's like, why did you even try to care?
Although it does allow him to give one of the best lines in the movie, where after every AT-AT has shot every possible laser at Luke, and he just says, do you think we got him?
Yeah.
But you didn't!
You did not!
Because he's not there. Yeah. And just like, I also like that it's this sort of like gentle callback to like Han screwing around on the comms, like, we're fine! How are you?
Oh yeah.
Right? Like, I think people forget how like funny the original trilogy was, right? Like there's a lot of humorous moments in it, and it's just like that. The Admiral hugs that got me. That was great.
Wipe that nervous expression off your face, said to a droid who literally cannot.
Yeah, he's just like, this is my face. But he did, like, 3PO 100% looked very nervous when he was just like turning his face towards Leia, right? Mm-hmm.
I think his arm is bent at a different angle.
Well, he's like,
you know, when talking about The Mandalorian, we give Pablo Pascal a lot of very legitimate, I think, and very earned credit for being so good at body acting, you know, and conveying so much emotion. And I think we don't give the credit to Anthony Daniels, the person who plays C-3PO. We really should have. Because, you're right. Like, it's that same thing. We can't actually see his face, but he does convey that he's nervous or he's afraid or he's proud.
Yeah, or just like, we shouldn't mutiny right now.
Frantic.
Supporting a mutiny wouldn't be proper. So good.
No. It's like, I'm out of here.
Yeah. Well, and even like Poe mentions to like BB-8 where he's like, happy beeps. Yeah. Like, you gotta...
What about from you all? Any other kind of moments? Any other moments? Ash, there been stuff in the chat we can touch on? I think we've hit a lot of it. Were there any questions the chat asked that we haven't gotten to?
I have more of like comments than questions. Vermilion earlier said that I saw it. I saw it in the first time. Hang on, I'm going to try to restructure this. Saw it in the first time through that one of the biggest themes. Okay, I saw that one of the biggest themes of this one is about trying something and failing as a part of life, and that makes the whole Canto Bite part of the great. Sorry, Vermilion. Little more syllables on the emphasis. And that makes the whole Canto Bite part a great part of it because they tried to get the Codebreaker but failed and tried to get a Codebreaker proxy, brought him back, and that failed too. Poe's plans all failed, Luke's plan for Kylo failed, and Yoda said failure is our best teacher. Sorry, I butchered the shit out of that.
But yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, like, we didn't even talk about DJ at all as a character. Yeah. And I think he's great, right? He's exactly what he said he was. He's like, I will just do things for the highest bidder. And then they're like upset that he betrayed them. It's like, I straight up told you this is what I was going to do. And I also like his reveal that like these people you're so against because they're selling weapons to the quote unquote bad guys are also selling weapons to the quote unquote good guys. Right. And so it's like, who's the real bad guy? Who's the real good guy?
Yeah, he's the most cynical, but in that, like, he's pointing out hard truths, you know? Mm-hmm. And in some ways, he's obviously a darker, more sinister version, but, like, for those who know the Clone Wars, does he give you kind of serious Hondo energy? Like, it's that same kind of role of the person who, like, kind of, like, with both the Empire and the Separatists and the Republic. It's like, yeah. They're both kind of full of nonsense. Like, he's
like a less, like, ostentatious Hondo, for sure. Yeah.
He just wants his cut.
Yeah. Vermilion One also points out that the scene between Leia and Holdo talking about Poe is a good nod at the respect of Poe while still being upset that he's being totally insubordinate. And like, yeah, completely agree, right? They both agree that Poe's got potential and they like him, but like he needs to be knocked down a peg. And he needs to stop thinking that jumping in his X-Wing and blowing things up is the answer to everything and then just doing it without asking anybody.
Yeah. And that scene, the depth of affection and friendship that those two were able to show in just like a very short interaction.
Yeah.
She's like, I've said it enough. You say it.
I know.
Oh.
Like Laura Dern and Carrie Fisher are both just like amazing women. I love them so much.
Me too.
They are. And that line of like, I can't do this without you. I can't suffer one more loss. Of course you can. You know, there's
it's me like, how.
Yeah. Oh, so good. So good.
And it did make me wonder, and I don't want to project things here, but like I do think it's like I kind of wish again that we had more time to explore the Leia Poe relationship, because I do think it's interesting that like she's lost her son, and now she has this very clear like, you know, I don't want to say that like she's becoming a mother to him by any means, but like that she may see a little bit of that same like, because that line where she says like, oh, he's such trouble, don't you love him, like you know, or I really like him, yeah, me too. It makes the scene with her and him at the beginning feel so different because it's now not, I'm scolding you and you're terrible and I wish someone else were here, but it's, I'm scolding you because I expect better of you, because I know you can be better, because I want you to be better.
I mean, that's the read I got on it on the first go through. Like she was very disappointed in him, right? Like in that mom way where you're just like, my soul. Yeah. And I think I don't know, I have no idea, but I would imagine that Carrie Fisher's passing probably had something to do with not really fully exploring the relationship between Poe and Leia in the third movie.
Yeah,
which is super unfortunate for more ways than one, obviously. Yeah.
And then it's something I always try to remember. There's a lot of things about the third movie I don't like, but also there's a lot of things I think it wanted to do it couldn't because Carrie Fisher passed.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I do want us to start wrapping up. We've gone on quite a while, but are there any other kind of last comments or thoughts from any of you all or from the chat?
The last one I have is Sunny Tetris says, one thing that I heard complained about was when the movie came out that it felt like a slow speed police chase. Personally, I love the chase aspect of the movie. It reminded me of Battlestar Galactica. The intensity of being chased by a stronger power really gave the movie stakes and made it feel almost like a thriller.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree. And my main familiarity with Battlestar Galactica is through the Battlestar Galactica board game.
Really? I love that show.
It's such a good game. I watched the show because I played the game. But
well, that's why I was super excited about Starbuck, or I guess you guys call her Bo-Katan.
Yes, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I think I was just gonna say it's a good point in that that thriller, the constant pressure of having the enemy looming. I don't know if any of you are familiar with It Follows, but I think that same sort of energy of you can see the enemy, they're just walking very slowly towards you constantly. Yeah. And it's just
After we saw that movie, my husband, we came up with a contingency plan and figured out how we'd be able to get away from it. It had Facebook and airplanes.
Delightful.
Yeah, you have to get a group and everybody has to keep talking and you got to keep moving and you got to keep housing the person and keeping them moving. So as long as you all supported the one person who had it to live, you could keep going.
Delightful. Yeah. Easy peasy. I also speaking of being based on other movies, how the first one, not Rise of Skywalker, Force Awakens, I remembered, was very much an homage to New Hope. Mm-hmm. And like we talked about how Last Jedi here is more similar to Return of the Jedi, not Empire Strikes Back. Which I think is great, especially because like a weird little tidbit about like Empire Strikes Back is that like oh no, other way around. Like, yeah, George Lucas got Steven Spielberg to like make the second Indiana Jones movie dark because he's like, this is how you do trilogies. And I think like not having that like dark middle arc in this trilogy is like a little refreshing, right? Because it's nice.
This is dark.
It's a movie where everyone fails. For me, I thought this was much darker than Empire.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I just didn't see. I think like the idea of exploration of failure as like failure is a natural part of life. Failure is a teacher. Yeah. Kept it from being just like so dark, and it's less like physically dark as well. Like
they come out of there very hopeful. Like, instead of it being like, oh, God, I've lost a hand. What am I supposed to do? You know, everything's good. You know, my friend's on ice.
That's definitely true.
Sorry, Vicky. What'd you say?
Well, I think that there's a contrast here. At the end of Empire, Luke's lost his hand. He's found out this devastating thing about his family. Han Solo is frozen in carbonite. So the main characters themselves are at their lowest point. Mm-hmm. But the rebellion is still alive. Like, nothing about that movie had really any impact on the rebellion. They lost their base on Hoth, but they were still out there. Whereas at the end of this movie, Last Jedi, all of the main characters, are fine. And they are together now, like some of them meeting for the first time. Yeah. But the resistance itself is in shambles. Like, this is all that's left. Yeah, and they have to rebuild. And no one replied to the distress call. So it's kind of a contrast of those two.
Yeah, I guess
they're like, Leia, your hashtag doesn't mean anything.
Which I have to say, that one moment hit me incredibly hard. And I don't know if this is at all what was intended or just what I was projecting on it. That movie came out, and here I'm going to show like my own personal political beliefs. But I have a sense that Rian Johnson is kind of in a similar vein. It was in the middle of the Trump administration, and where like we'd been going through almost 2 years of like, oh, Mueller's going to save us, or oh, this person's going to save us, or oh, this report from the FBI will save us, and just didn't work. Or like when this story comes out, people will realize how bad Trump is, or when this story comes out, people will realize how bad Trump is, and so. That moment of them having that hope of, if we get here and we put out the signal and we use Leia's code, everyone will come to our rescue. And it still didn't work. And they're just still alone. It's both such a good moment, and why the moment where they do the exact same thing, but this time the whole fleet shows up in Rise of Skywalker, rang so hollow to me. Because to me, it's like, this is such a good moment of like, that book, Waiting on Superman. It's a book about education policy that I don't agree with, but still the idea of like that there's a real danger of telling yourself like someone will come and rescue us, that you can't do it. This is enough to start the resistance. These 20 people on this one ship is such a powerful moment.
Yeah, I didn't realize Waiting for Superman was a book. I thought it was just a documentary.
Oh yeah, I think it's a book first, but
I mean I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, Matthew. You just have to have the sultry voice of Lando Calrissian on the air, and people will come.
You were forgetting a variable.
Yeah, that is, Billy D. Williams would convince an awful lot of people to do an awful lot of things. Yeah. That's very true. I also just want to go back one thing to when we're talking about the chase scene. And I think Riki, you may have wanted to jump in there as well. But for me, the chase scene is one more of those scenes where it is so good on the first watch, but then every time I watch it, it loses a bit because it's. Yeah. You're right. The chase itself is so good and is so tense and is so brilliant, and then when you listen to like what they do plot wise to set up the chase,
no questions.
It makes no sense whatsoever.
Wait, we talking about like the horses or.
No, the starships.
No, I mean
because it's space. So why would being bigger make you go slower? Yeah.
No questions.
Yeah, you can't think about the science.
Let that little one go.
Cool. So, all right. Well, I think we've had a great. Oh no, Riki, was there something else you wanted to say about that chase aspect?
No, that was it. I was gonna say like it is an emotionally gripping chase. Ask no questions about the science.
Yes. That's what I'm taking from this.
I think that's
apparently it's. Ooh, I was going to say, apparently it's Billy D. Williams' birthday, having just spoken about him. Happy birthday.
Good to know. Good time to be talking about it. Yeah.
I had like one other quick moment, and that was when Poe and Rey introduced themselves to each other at the very end of the movie. And it's like, yeah, they haven't met.
Yeah, that so surprised me.
But we spent like 2 movies with these characters that even now, again, even though like I knew it was coming, I still was like, what? Yeah. You guys haven't met each other? So it's just like, I like that they address it, that they don't just have them being like, yes, hello. Yeah. It reminds them like we've been on separate sides of this thing for a long time.
Yeah. No, I think that was a great little moment.
True.
Wow.
It always makes me think about Marvel, like how Black Widow never met Doctor Strange. Like there's so many characters that just like never got to meet.
Oh yeah.
But we're also familiar with all of them.
We're like, wait, this doesn't make sense. But like she didn't get to ever meet him.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Just expect you all to be like hanging out together. Yeah,
having shawarma and stuff. What do you guys do?
Exactly. Ooh, shawarma.
I need to close this with a completely non-related at all rant, but I just need to let the shame of Disney Plus be put on blast forever. I was rewatching The Avengers, and you know how sometimes like Disney Plus will, or some of these things will like, they'll let you see the credits, but they'll put it in like a small screen so they can advertise the next thing. They did that with Avengers so that you can barely see the shawarma scene. Disney, you own this.
But they let you skip directly to it.
Do they?
Like you can, there's a button that's like,
just click on
you just
the
have to click
again.
Skip credits. No, there's like a button and it's weirdly worded, and I clicked on it because I was like, is this going to take me to the end credits scene or is this going to skip the whole thing? So it's like, I was bold and I skipped directly to it. But yeah, that's how you have to do it to see it big. Otherwise, yes, it is like picture-in-picture timing, which is a tragedy.
Since we're now at the bashing Disney for what they...
Disney's UI needs some tweaking.
Big time.
Anyway, so thank you all so much. You've been awesome. To our fans, what do you all think of Last Jedi? What did you love? What did you not love? What do you think of the different themes and stuff that we talked about here today? Would love to hear from you. Let us know what you think about the Disney Plus app. All of it. The best way to contact us is the Ethical Panda at Facebook or on Twitter. You can also email us at theethicalpanda@gmail.com. And all that information can be found at theethicalpanda.com. You can also find more podcasts by both myself as well as a number of the other people who are on here by going to strandedpanda.com. Stranded Panda is a podcast network that this podcast and my other podcasts are a part of. And on there, you can also find great podcasts about the MCU, Star Trek, the Orville, DC. They just did a whole great thing on the monster movies, which I am so glad that they got me into that because they got me to watch Kong Skull Island. And I'm so mad because they made me watch Kong vs. Godzilla, which is god-awful, but I know I'm in the minority.
I loved it.
But anyway, all sorts of great podcasts there. Check them out. Let us know what you think. Would love to hear your comments. And to Riki, Ashley, and Sarah, thank you all so much for being a part of this. And everybody, have a good day.
Bye.
May the Force be with you.
Riki, are you going to let the visitors watch?
Kenobi.
There we go.